Welcome to Sound Painting Lesson number 3. And we're going to be, in this lesson, we're going to be dealing with hits, movement, laughter, speak, air sounds, whistle, and again a little bit of speaking about improvisation and finish your idea, and improvising with different content like improvising with long tones, improvising with minimalism, and what does that mean in sound painting. And we're going to speak about with hits, a hit, 5 hits, etc., etc. And in one situation here in the performance of the gestures, a musician makes a mistake and continues afterwards because one continues with their mistakes. There are no mistakes. So let's get started. So that's a brief overview of what we're going to do. And a hit, the hit is this, a hit. You prepare it in neutral and you step into the box and you're using the imaginary staff. So something up high is a high hit and going down to middle range hits and down to lower hits. Now a hit is just a very, like as a vocalist, if I did a hit, it'd be like, what? It was just like, bop. It's just one point of sound, one big staccato, if you will. And with movement, a hit does relate to the part. This is an exception, kind of an irregular verb in sound painting, where the hit relates to the part of the body. So a hit down up here would be the head for dancers, and here would be the shoulders and the torso going down in the range of the torso and the legs and the feet. Now, that's all well and good. And when you're working with movement, if you're doing hits and you have dancers in the group and you're doing the hits fairly slowly, but if you do them rapidly, there's no way a dancer is going to be able to follow that. So in that case, what a dancer does is just performs a hit. She or he performs a hit, period. Any hit that they desire. Musicians and people working with sound can quite easily follow the range of hits. Now, if a hit comes from silence, of course it goes back from silence. If there's a long tone or some other content being performed by the group, and then the sound painter says whole group hit and does a hit, the group performs the hit and then goes back to the long tone. A hit is not a layer, so we don't use layer for a hit because it's very abrupt and it just interrupts the content that's being performed and goes back to the content after the hit. Now also, you'll see that I'm saying whole group 5 hits. Now when I do that, there's a couple of ways to do that. One could be that the first hit I'll sign in the box, and everybody will perform that hit with me. The next 4 hits, they'll perform on their own. You, the performer, will perform the rest of the hits, the remaining 4, within like 3 seconds. And you don't have to perform them in a regular pulse. You could perform them in a more irregular manner. That's up to the performer. If the sound painter simply puts just wants to give 5 hits and then steps, there's no reason to announce 5 hits. You just give 5 hits if that's what you want. You don't announce 5. In sound painting, if you announce 5, it means that you're going to do the first one yourself with the group and they do the other 4. Or you could say whole group 5 hits, slowly enter. An example, a really interesting example is working with, if you have like group 1 doing a long tone, and group 2, now group 1's doing a long tone, group 2, 10 hits, and slowly enter. Now they're going to perform those 10 hits between, in this case, 1 to 5 seconds. And now I can turn back to group 1 and do something with a long tone and change the content. While for 5 seconds or so, group 2 is occupied with performing the hits. So I kind of set that in motion and turn back to group 1. So anyway, hits can be used many different ways. again, just to reiterate, you can say whole group hit and step in the box and perform the hit. Or you can say 5 hits and then slowly enter, or 5 hits and the first one is with the sound painter. And one last point, imagine we have whole group long tone, play, and now I say hit off in the position of neutral, moving into the box and giving the hit. After the hit is performed, the group stops. So again, if the group is performing a long tone and the sound painter says whole group hit off, while now they're performing the long tone, I step in the box and I sign the hit in my desired range, hit, they perform the hit, and then they stop after that. Okay, we also have the gesture, let me stand up. It's movement. This is dancer in front of the body, and this is movement out to the side, either hand. Now, this is an interdisciplinary gesture. So you could scan, let me get up. Scan with movement. Now as I'm scanning by, the group is just performing movement. Only, of course, when my arm lines up, the people in front of me, the performers move, and then they go back to neutral, back to their sitting straight in the chair position, or back to their original position, whatever that might be. Movement, with a dancer moving, it's going to look like dance. With musicians moving and actors moving, it could be very pedestrian movement, just like scratching your head or looking away and looking back. Something very simple. We're not asking, with an interdisciplinary gesture, the sound painter is not asking the musician to be a dancer. No, not at all. Just to make a movement. If imagine somebody has a trumpet, they just move the trumpet up, or a saxophone just to the side or something. Or violin and just lift the bow up. Very simple, but sometimes when you're scanning with movement with a fairly large group, just having those very pedestrian responses come from the group can be incredibly interesting to see. It's a living sculpture of sorts. So movement can be, movement can be done a whole bunch of different ways. It could be minimalism with movement, whole group minimalism with movement, etc. When you get into using the with gesture, that's just hundreds and hundreds of combinations just with the so-called basic sound painting language. So the with gesture is really interesting when you look at the language and you kind of cross-reference long tone with movement, long tone with, etc. A bunch of other things. Air sounds, this gesture. It's just simply shh, that type of thing. If there's no voice involved in it, there's no tone involved in it. You also will see laughter, and that's simply laughter. Scan with laughter. Scan with air sounds. And then there's speaking. Now, in speaking, you don't tell a story. If I was to say whole group speak and then play, the performers aren't telling the story. That can be very difficult to do unless you're a storyteller or unless you're an actor who is really good at improvising the story. So what do? When you're given speak, you think of 2 or 3 words, like, yellow, 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 red, red. And this morning, why? You just simply grab onto a couple of words and you repeat them. You think of words more musically instead of trying to tell a story. That's a different sign for how to tell a story or asking a performer to tell a story. So speak is just simply speaking, but not telling a story. It's too difficult to do. Especially when you think about, you can go point to point with speaking. And now you're pointing at a performer who doesn't have the experience speaking on stage. So, they're really going to kind of get very quiet and maybe do nothing. So So it makes it a lot easier for the performer to speak if you give them, these instructions about the gesture itself, which says, it could be anything. You can say anything. You can think about the instrument you're playing. You can think about the color of the clothes you have on. You can using sort of like a Meisner technique, if you will, where you look around the room and you see curtains and you go, oh, blue curtains, or it's dark in here. So think of something very simple when speaking. When this whole group speak, it's really simple. Don't get complicated with a story. Now, you're also going to see improvise with different gestures, improvise with minimalism, etc., things like that. Now, what improvise with minimalism would mean, or improvise with pointillism means in sound painting, it doesn't mean that you only, let's say, improvise with pointillism, right? Slowly enter. It's the whole group. Now, let me just erase that. Erase, this means to erase. I'm erasing it. This is the erase gesture if you decide not to do it. So now I'm going to say woodwind 1, improvise with pointillism, slowly enter. Now, woodwind 1 is going to use pointillism as their main material to improvise with. But they might add bits of long tones, or they might throw in something that's kind of minimalistic, or they might do something else, like a long phrase, well, not too long, a short phrase, and then go back to the pointillism. So when you say in sound painting, improvise with, and then give a content like long tone, or pointillism, or any of the other signs, it doesn't mean that's the only content you perform. It's the one that you perform the most. Okay, now, this means musicians, right? This is what I was saying before. We have actors, we have dancers, we have actors, we have visual artists, we have musicians, right? Now, the musician gesture, this gesture, also means discipline. What am I saying? So for example, if I say whole group scan with air sounds. Now, you're not playing air sounds if you're like an instrumentalist who can play air sounds through their instrument. It's not through your instrument. That's a different phrase. You're just making air sounds with your mouth. So now, I'm scanning by, moving into the box and scanning by, and performers are making air sounds, etc. Right? Now I want to go back to having a scan, but with their instrument or with their discipline. So now we say, there's two ways to do this. One is we could just say whole group scanning, and that cancels the scanning with air sounds. Okay, that's one way to do it. But maybe that might not be clear sometimes to the performers. And sound painting is communication between the composer and the group. Back to the sound painter, back to the group. So sometimes you really need to be very clear about what you want when you're signing. So maybe, whole group scanning with air sounds, and then I scan with air sounds. And now I cancel it by just going to whole group and then scanning. Maybe by chance some people will perform air sounds. It can happen. So what is a way to make sure it doesn't happen? Whole group scanning with discipline. So this saxophone, alto saxophone looking gesture also means discipline. You can't confuse it with musician, because if you say scanning with musicians, it doesn't make any sense. Now, if I have a multidisciplinary group and I want just to scan the musicians, imagine I have 10 actors, 10 dancers, 10 musicians, and I only want the musicians to respond. I say musicians, scan. Simple. Returning to your discipline. Look at how the phrase is formed. It's scanning with your discipline. It's not scanning with musicians. That would be musicians scan, and now it's only the musicians I'm scanning. Or dancers, who, what, etc. Remember the syntax. Who, what, right? So now, who, what, how, when. Scanning with your discipline. Okay, so I hope that's clear. I've seen this happen quite a bit, this error. So lots of talking in the beginning of this third lesson, and I would suggest, as I have said a few times, to watch the beginning of this a few times, and then go to the performance of the gestures, and then come back and go and again listen to what I'm saying. And I think that it'll be quite clear to you. It's not so clear if you only were to watch the video, the performance of the gestures. You wouldn't understand the subtleties, the rules that are contained, that are the parameters of each gesture. So let's go to the performance of the gestures, and I'll see you after. Okay, so that's going to wrap up lesson 3. I'm going to keep this lesson a little bit on the short side because I think it's really important to since we're getting into quite a bit of detail here at this point in your lessons, that you watch these later lessons like 3, 4, etc., 5. You'll need to watch these lessons a few times to really get what's going on. Maybe, or maybe you get it right away. We'll see. But anyway, so I just want to address something that happened in the performance of the gestures. Towards the end of the performance of the gestures, I said whole group hit off. Well, I gave the hit, expecting that after the hit that the group would stop. That'd be the end of it, whole group hit off, and then I was going to move on to something else after that. Well, when I said hit off, after I signed the hit, stepped in the box and signed the hit, a woodwind player and an actor must have missed the off sign. So they kept going. And when they kept going, they realized the rest of the group had stopped. So immediately they assumed the error. They took the error and performed it with integrity. And they kept performing. That's the rule in sound painting. Wrong and strong. When you're not sure what to do, you keep going. As we say, when in doubt, don't lay out. So the two performers, the actor and the woodwind player, I believe it's the alto saxophone, they realized they made the error, but they kept going. And as I said earlier in the lessons, these errors can be a wonderful gift. And to get your performers to accept that there's really no error in sound painting, except stopping when you make one. So there's no error. You keep going. You immediately play that error with integrity. It's so, so important for live composition. So that's going to wrap it up for lesson number 3, and I will see you for lesson number 4. Bye for now.